While it started slowly, as the fight reached the middle stages, it became more fierce, with both fighters looking and working for the opening to land that big telling blow. In round 10, the last round, Hubble seemed as though he knew he was trailing and bored in on the challenger. But McIlwain had enough in reserve to meet leather with leather. And the former Newcastle champion amateur is now the New South Wales light heavyweight professional champion.
I thought towards the end I might have been a little bit stronger than he, and I was getting a little bit on top, but there wasn't a great deal in it, I don't suppose.
What's next for you now?
Well, I've got an 8-rounder down in Young in a couple of weeks' time, and hopefully the promoters up here, they're thinking about a South Pacific title fight, lining it up for me, so we'll just have to wait and see how it goes.
Phil McIlwain's still regarded as a Newcastle boy. After the win last night, the old call from the Sydney fighters, Stew City, Newcastle, won't fight here again.
Last night's fight was, two judges were picked by the Federation, and I was appointed referee. And I read in the paper this morning what this Gary Hubble had to say about not getting a fair go in Newcastle.
You'd deny that?
I'd deny that, but because he got beaten in Sydney in his last fight anyway.
By the same fighter?
By the same fighter, that's right.
The proposal is to demolish the theatre, including the historic facade, and erect a 3-storey building containing 26 motel units. At one stage during last night's council meeting, Alderman Alan Morris expressed some opposition to the development, describing it as being squeezed into a shoehorn site. I asked Alderman Morris if this sort of attitude could be seen to be causing unnecessary delay, which could turn developers away from Newcastle.
And I think the question is, people like to interpret whether there's some hidden meaning or hidden motives. The fact is, in my time in council and many other aldermen, we want the best for Newcastle. We don't want second rate. We don't want substandard development. If that means that we have to press harder, then we'll press harder.
Alderman Morris, could I just not altogether take this out of the council context, but can I ask you personally for your opinion about that development in the junction? Because it's your opinions you'll be foisting on council.
No, on the contrary, I think the council has to have codes, has to have policies, has to have capacities. That site is an allowable. That site for motel is an allowable development, and council could not reject that development. My personal views is it's a fairly minimal, a fairly marginal type of development. I don't think it's particularly a good one for that area, but I don't necessarily say.
So that's what I'm getting at. Your attitude is that it's a marginal development.
No, on the contrary, I think it's reasonable to say that one can discriminate between a development, whether you support a particular development on a site or not, or whether you support whatever goes in that site being of high quality.
Well, Alderman, perhaps it's not the first time a developer's been frustrated. Take Kern's application for the development of Dark's Iceworks.
It's been rejected outright. Kearns were advised in August of last year, before they were submitted an application, at a conference at which aldermen were unanimous that council would apply its codes, its building codes and its policies on that site.
Do you agree that perhaps even the newer codes should be changed to allow development and perhaps the creation of jobs? I mean,
if I could see that in fact a developer would say, okay, on this site I only make 2% profit rather than 20%, I might consider it. That we sacrifice quality and now, if you're saying that we sacrifice quality and maintain profitability and maintain profits, then that to my mind is not a publicly acceptable argument. The public wants reasonable quality, and it also wants things. It also wants jobs.
Although Sylvia Plath's portrait of a poet is about a disturbed woman who took her own life, it's a curiously gentle play. It's perhaps better described as a documentary and a play reading because in it a narrator tells the main facts of Sylvia Plath's life in between dramatised selections from her own works. This distances the work from the audience, and so we didn't feel involved with the woman, we just observed her. Three actresses portray different aspects of the poet, and in this main skip production, Jenny Lloyd was very appealing as the woman most of the world saw, but Carrie-Anne O'Hearn was perhaps over-dramatic as the tortured soul. Dimity Raftus presented the detached poet figure with great dignity and great depth of feel. While we saw three faces of Sylvia, we didn't ever really see a complete character, and despite Sian Nguyen's delicate and sensitive direction, I felt I didn't know any more about Sylvia Plath than before I went in. It's one of those curious plays that's satisfying while you watch it, but afterwards seemed just a bit too delicate to leave much of a mark.
The drama began shortly after 5 last night. A masked man armed with a single-barrel shotgun burst into the home of Mrs. Antonio Lesnick. After threatening her, he then ordered Mrs. Lesnick to drive him to the nearby Rothbury estate of Bacolban.
He put the gun at my face. He said, "Lady, that's hold up." And he asked me if I have any money. I said, "No, I don't have any." And then he said, "Have your card?" I said, "No, at first." But he probably did see it done in the shed.
Wearing an old man mask and overalls, the gunman then kidnapped Mrs. Lesnick from her home and drove to the nearby Rothbury estate at Bacolban. Here he threatened to shoot her unless the company handed over money. Police say that the man then exchanged Mrs. Lesnick for a 32-year-old employee, Mr. David Cook of Maitland, who was then forced to drive the gunman to McDonald Lane before he was released. Detectives say the man took a considerable amount of money. Police are now continuing their search for a gold-coloured Ford Escort sedan, registration number JMJ702, which the gunman is believed to be driving.
As we did.
How much area were you covering in the search?
Approximately 8 kilometres from that picnic area of where she was lost from. You had to bear in mind, because of the terrain that we were operating in there were some areas with her physical requirements she would not have got into. She would just not got into there because these people that are physically fit and able to do that weren't able to enter into those, so that was the basis of it. But we covered that 8 kilometres to saturation point around the picnic area.
How much does a search like this cost?
I would say the final results will be extensive as far as finance is concerned. I don't know exactly, but it would cost a lot of money, but I don't think that's even a consideration. Whilst the management is strong, that hasn't been a consideration at all. The consideration's been to find the girl and find her as quickly as possible.
There are two theories. Perhaps Deborah has left the area or she's dead. Is there any one that stands out as perhaps a favourite theory?
And there's not a favourite theory, but I feel that they are part of the area because of the time lapse now. Common sense alone, without the medical advice we've had, would say if she's still in the mountains, well, we consider that she would be dead. If she's got a lift out of the area or somebody's picked her up in a motor vehicle, well, there's a number of interpretations could be placed on that also, and all of those will be thoroughly investigated and are in fact and have been since she went missing.
Controversial proposal was discussed last night by the Health, Building, Community Services and Architectural Committee. It was decided by the committee that a draft local environment plan should be prepared in respect of the proposed retail centre before Council makes its final decision on the proposal. That recommendation will be put to a full meeting of Council next Monday. If it's accepted, any decision on the shopping centre will be delayed for at least several months. The $25 million Crossroads project is a joint venture by Dalgety Australia and Hooker Retail Developments. The developers say that the shopping centre would inject $2 million a month into the local economy. However, the project is fiercely opposed by existing retailers who say a new centre in the area would seriously harm their trade. 6th of November, several large trees were removed from the high school site on Main Road, Burrigal, without the necessary council permit. The Health, Building, Community Services and Architectural Committee was told that the action contravened council's tree preservation order. The members decided that legal action should be taken against both the Catholic Education Office and the excavation company E&K Harvey Proprietary Limited.
More than 250,000 of the maintenance-free concrete sleepers made at Denman were used on the Sandy Hollow railway line. But with the completion of that project and the end of a smaller contract for the new coal loader line, things looked grim for the Denman plant, which had already cut its workforce from 30 to 18. However, the State Rail Authority contract for 215,000 sleepers to upgrade the Muswellbrook to Newcastle line will guarantee 2.5 years' work and will provide at least another 8 jobs. At present, the plant is running at half pace, turning out 408 sleepers a day. But it could double that production, and Monia's National Sleeper Division manager is hoping that will happen.
We believe that the future of the plant now will be that they'll do the upgrading of the second part of the line, and we see a long-term operation up here.
You can see an increase in jobs as well, ultimately?
Oh, yes, we've, within, I say, 8 to 9 months, we are responsible for the loading out of the sleepers for SRA, and we will then employ possibly another 8 to 10 people that will allow us to increase our workforce from what we've already got. And then, of course, we envisage then hoping to go back onto 2 plants, so we could probably have 40 to 45 people back on the staff, which will be a big assistance to the local area.
It was Jack Hibbard's Dimboola which started the theatre restaurant boom in Australia in the early 70s. It was one of the most successful Australian plays ever and was subsequently made into a movie. What was hilariously funny 10 years ago, however, now seems less so. Dimboola has not stood the test of time without losing some of its bite. But there is still plenty left to entertain the audience, and the cast make every post a winner. The show takes the form of a wedding reception in a small country town, with the audience as the guests. There is a clash between the families of the bride and groom, a few fist fights with very little damage done, and numerous other disasters. Director Alan McFadden has coordinated the big cast of 16 well, and they give a polished and professional performance. They have energy and class. Tricia Franks as the mother of the bride, Alan Bowden as the groom's uncle, and Michael Taper as the priest all gave excellent performances. I would have liked the official table a little closer to the audience, and the 2 gate crashers, Mutton and Bayonet, to be portrayed as older characters. I also felt that some of the music was a little out of context, but they are only minor points. The Shortland Room is an excellent venue for theatre restaurant and will no doubt be used again for this purpose in the future. In summary, Dimboola is an excellent night out for that Christmas party with a difference.
Well, we're holding a series of mass meetings at the moment because of cuts in public education announced in the last state budget. The Federation has, throughout the year, campaigned against the Fraser government's approach to the funding of public education. But what the Rand government has in fact done is to add to the problem by saying that while it can afford to increase all departments on average by about 13% in their funding, it'll only provide public schools with 5.2%. That's about half the rate of inflation. The net effect of that in education is that hundreds of jobs have in fact not been made available, it should have been made available. It means a whole lot of services have been cut back. And the Federation's been campaigning pretty vigorously in the last few weeks in the media and with its membership about those cuts.
How far are you willing to take this campaign?
Well, we'll be discussing at the mass meetings refusing to do certain things which would be educationally bad for children and for our members. And we'll also be discussing at those meetings a campaign of industrial action from early next year, unless we can get the government to reverse its approach.
This house at Raymond Terrace is typical of those which the Housing Commission is having renovated. The Commission has engaged Drinkwater Home Improvements to install exterior cladding and to revamp bathrooms and kitchens. The homes are in Raymond Terrace, Singleton and Muswellbrook, and the $1.1 million contract is seen as a welcome boost to the building industry.
With the building industry generally slowing down, we're very pleased to have been selected to improve these homes.
How many jobs will actually be provided by the contract?
There would be approximately 50 tradesmen directly employed on the contracts, and in addition, of course, indirectly, a lot of people will be employed by the companies supplying materials.
You'll use all local labour on the contract?
Yes, it will be all local labour in the Hunter Valley area.
Today's hot weather brought little comfort to anyone, least of all members of the fire brigade. Dozens of scrub fires in the area were fanned by strong northwesterly winds. At one stage, fire in Macquarie Avenue Gateshead threatened surrounding properties, but swift action by firemen quickly brought it under control. Weather officer at the Hunter Valley Research Station, Chris Crossley, spent part of today charting Newcastle's temperatures. He recorded 32.4 degrees at 9 a.m, 38.2 at midday and 41.5 at 4 p.m. But whilst most of us braved the heat either at work or at school, those able to get to the beach certainly made the most of it. Huge crowds were evident up and down the coast, and the calm ocean made it safe swimming for everyone. With the beaches being the ideal place to be, most shopping centres were less crowded than they normally would be on a day so close to Christmas. Most of those who did venture out on the streets, though, were suitably armed with either an ice cream or a drink.
A large group of Waterboard employees attended the stop work meeting at the Newcastle Workers Club. It was called after an unsuccessful hearing into the appointment of some juniors to the position of meter readers. The men, members of the Wages Division, believe the jobs should have been allocated on seniority. They are now seeking a conference with the Hunter District Water Board in a bid to resolve the issue. The ban on overtime has brought the matter before the courts, and it's expected to be heard early next week. The men will return to work on Monday.
It's been a long time since New South Wales was forced to import coarse grain, but the current situation is better. However, even importing grain has its problems. This maize from New Zealand was acceptable to federal authorities because it met stringent quarantine requirements, and New Zealand is in the same geographic zone. But bids to bring in grain from Canada and the United States have so far been denied. This shipment of 4,500 tonnes will be used exclusively by the poultry industry, but at best it's only about a month's supply for local users. Wheat can be used, but even that's in limited supply and is far more costly.
Only a dramatic improvement in the present drought situation is likely to alleviate the current grain shortage in New South Wales. Producers are counting on a good summer crop. But if that isn't forthcoming by next April, then they'll be forced to import grain from somewhere overseas.